Hey everyone, so I'm here to talk about the writing process. I'm going to break it down into 2 points, phases, and how to write literary analysis. Okay, and this should help you as you're working through your ideas for your essays. Okay, so let's start off with the phases of the writing process. Okay, so there's a few phases that you want to think about just generally. Okay, there's the gathering phase, the planning phase, the organizing phase, and the writing phase. And each one of your essays are going to contain these phases. Okay, so let's start off with gathering. Now, when you're gathering, you're determining your primary source. You take some time to develop some ideas about that primary source, right? Read it, maybe reread it, jot some notes down. Think about the types of arguments that you might want to make. And then you want to choose secondary sources that are scholarly that work with your chosen argument, right? You don't want to have secondary sources that are, kind of doing their own thing. You want to make sure that these sources are helping contribute to the argument that you're making. All right, so that's the gathering phase, identifying your primary source, reading it, and then identifying and gathering secondary sources. Now, as far as the planning phase goes, reread the primary source again. It never hurts to read or reread again and again. Okay, every time I read something, personally, I come away with a new understanding of what that primary source is. Okay, and likely the same thing will be for you. If you're thinking through, you're asking questions of that primary source, then you'll probably have the same interaction with your primary sources as I do. Okay. And then you want to read and take notes on your secondary sources. Write down quotations or paraphrases that you think might be helpful to you. The most important thing to remember is that you want to use each of these steps as a planning tool for your next step. So if you've got quotations and paraphrases, including in-text citations to make it easier for yourself, um, that's one step that you don't have to accomplish again when you're going back through to write. You don't have to keep looking back at your secondary sources if you've got your notes on them already. You can just refer back to your notes, and then any reference to the original secondary source is going to be minimal. Okay. And then once you've gathered all of your materials, you've started your planning, consider your argument again. Okay. Make sure that the argument that you set out to make is actually the one that you're still making. And you know what? If it's not, that's okay too, right? Then you just adjust your mindset. But you want to keep in mind kind of where you came from and then how you got to the space that you're in. All right. Also, this argument that you initially started off with, do you have enough evidence or have you strayed just a little bit? Okay, that's an important thing to consider as well. And if you've strayed, that's fine. Like I've said, you just make some adjustments to your argument so that your secondary sources match what you're trying to say. Now, as far as the organization goes, you want to develop your introduction and your thesis statement, right? Your introduction is going to discuss things like, your context for the story, that sort of thing. Your thesis statement is now going to be the sentence that identifies your exact argument that you're actually planning to make in your essay and how you're going to make it. And then you want to create an outline that follows your thesis statement. Now, the reason for the outline is because in an outline form, you can move things around a lot easier than full sentences and full ideas, right? So you want to, an outline can be really helpful because it gives you that flexibility. You also want to make sure that as you're going through and you're writing it out in this organization phase, that the evidence is backing up that argument that you're making in your thesis statement. Now, I know I keep saying, make sure that you're actually focusing on your argument. And the reason that I say that is because it's very easy to get started writing and get excited, and then all of a sudden find that you've strayed away from the original argument that you've tried to make. Okay, so you want to, in each of these steps, make sure that you're consistently double checking so that you're on the right track. And if you've moved on to a different track, that's totally fine. But you want your reader to recognize the track that you're on. You don't want there to be any sort of confusion. Okay? Now is the time for the writing process. Okay? You sit down, you focus, and you put it all together. Now, I know what you're thinking, oh, that's easier said than done. True. We live in a world that has constant demands on our time, our attention, all of that. But the more that you have done in the planning and the organization phase, the easier the writing phase will be and the less intensive focus you're going to need to have as you're writing it because you have all those ideas down. It's just about bringing it together. Okay. So that's kind of the phases of the writing process generally. Now, let's talk about how to write literary analysis. So, introductions. Now, this is going to break down each of the different parts. So, your introduction, you want to start off with a hook that's interesting, something interesting about your primary source to get your reader interested. Why did you pick this primary source? What about it jumped out to you as something that was really something you can sort of sink your teeth into? Okay, explain that. Or, maybe pull a quotation from the text that you found to be amazingly engaging, right? Utilize that. Okay. Um, Moving on, the next part of your intro should be some context, right? What does your reader need to remember from your primary source to understand your analysis, right? You always want to think, okay, I don't have to summarize the entire thing because my reader's already read this. Okay, so that's the perspective that you want to have uh, for your um, for your essays. Your reader's already read this, so we just need to rehash the most important information. And then your thesis statement, right? So the identification of your primary source, what that title is, the primary source author, your overall argument, and then the ways that you're going to support that argument, right? Those are all things that you want to have in your thesis statement. And the reason for that is you want your thesis to be a standalone identifier of everything that your essay is going to discuss. And if it doesn't do that, then we need to work on strengthening it. Okay. So you want to think of it in that way. Now, as far as body paragraphs go, topic sentences of the body paragraphs are going to be a reminder of the overall argument, right? Just reiterate it really quickly, and that's from the thesis, to the point that this particular paragraph is trying to make in relation to that overall argument. Okay, again, this information should be in the thesis as well, and you just bring it down. Okay, your body paragraphs then should contain evidence, right? So it's information from your primary and secondary sources, also your interpretation of the primary source text, right? All of that becomes evidence, and it helps your reader understand the reasoning in your overall argument, right? In this piece that this body paragraph contains. And then you want a transition sentence. Okay, this is one sentence that ties the information from this paragraph into the next paragraph. Okay, and some of you might be thinking, oh, it's really hard to do that. They're so different. But are they? Because both of the paragraphs are trying to confirm that same overall argument that you're making. So, really, are they so different? Just pick a little piece of information from this previous body paragraph, pick a little piece from the next, and use that one sentence to tie them both together. Now, your conclusion should reiterate the thesis statement, right? It should say, okay, without saying in this paper, right? Essentially, in this paper, these are the things that were discussed, right? So there should be some general information from your essay, nothing super, super specific, right? This is just a reminder of the stuff that you've talked about, okay? And the reason that you have your conclusion there is because your reader should just get a few minutes of reiteration of what you've discussed. So that way, in case they've forgotten, in case they were unclear on a few points as they were reading, this is the moment where you tie everything together. Okay? And just remember that in your conclusion, there should be no new information. That information, new information, should only be in your body paragraphs. Okay? No new quotations, no new evidence presented through literary analysis, nothing like that. All right. So this was just the briefest of rundowns regarding the writing process generally, and then how that writing process applies to our literary analysis. If you have any questions about this whatsoever, don't hesitate to reach out, send me an email, and I'll be happy to help you. All right. So have a great rest of your day. Do awesome things, and I will see you in the next video.